Say, Phil.
Good evening, JR.
How you doing, bud?
Doing very well. The weather's warming up.
Yes, it is. Yes,
Doing, but
it
do you
is.
think it'll rain?
Judy looked at the radar a while ago, and she said, if all this gets here, we're gonna be wet, aren't we?
We're
I
gonna
said,
be
"Yeah."
wet again.
Yes, we're gonna be wet again. You're
Well,
right.
It just so happens that our lesson's about Noah tonight
He had a little rain.
and the flood. This series here, Jay, is talking about risk takers
Right.
and people operating on faith. We always, when we're wanting to invest a dollar, you know, we want to get the best person to advise us.
Right,
on it.
right.
And we want them to tell us where to put it, where we can get the most for our money, and you know, how much risk are we going to have, and all that type of thing. But when you're going to grow your faith, you need to invest time and energy into your relationship with Jesus Christ. And you can watch him do his work.
Yeah.
You can sit back after prayer and see him take action.
Mm-hmm.
I've experienced that all my life, and I know you have too.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you a risk taker. Sometimes
Yeah.
you do things that may not make sense to others.
Right.
But today we're going to look at Noah. Of course, we talk about people with faith. We sometimes forget that God can see everything that we do. He can read our thoughts. He can even know our intentions.
Yeah. Yeah.
He knows where we're at all the time. And he can do that because it's his nature. He's God. Boy, what if part of having an internet connection was that everybody knew your thoughts and what your business was? There'd be a lot fewer of them.
We wouldn't be on there as much, would we?
God knew everything about Noah.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible tells us that Noah was a righteous man, and God walked with him. Noah and called him righteous. When we look at his relationship with God, there's more to it. There was a lot of silence for a long period of time in their relationship. He's still worshiping God. But when they started conversing, things picked up. We look at our jobs. There's few things that we don't look forward to as much as a year-end review or a personnel evaluation of some sort. A lot of times your supervisor's so busy, they do it in a hurry. They struggle to find things, or they don't take the time to find things you need to work on. I knew a guy one time in the education business, was a principal at a school. He got a 100% on his evaluation, and 3 days later, he called him up and told him he wasn't going to be able to be principal next year.
That didn't seem quite right, did it?
He was in another district, and I won't say which one it was, but I just happened to be with him when he got the call. And for one thing, it was a call.
Yeah.
Something
in
like
person.
that you need to do in person.
Right.
And the other thing was, he was just stunned.
Yeah, of course.
You know, he had no idea. And it wasn't really anything he did.
Huh.
We let our personal devices, like our computers and our phones, we leave them on. And those people are watching everything we do on those things. They produce a record of our behavior, what we watch on TV, what kind of items we're looking at on an online catalog. I can put in just type a word in the search browser, and within the hour I'll have 3 or 4 pictures of these things coming up and advertising.
We just rented a dumpster to help to use to clean out the
Yeah,
parsonage
yeah.
down there. I've got ads advertising for dumpsters coming from everywhere. You can even talk about it. Phil. Your phone picks it up now. You start getting ads about
I
something
know
you
it.
talked about on the
I know
phone. Yeah.
Do we really want government officials
No,
or strangers or even those closest to us
not
to
really.
know everything about
No.
us?
We don't want God to, but He does. We know
we
He
sometimes
does.
forget that God can see our every action.
Hmm.
He is like that. He reads our thoughts, even knows our intentions.
And I said we didn't want God to know it, but gosh, how many times has that kept us out of trouble? By
Well-
knowing that God knows what we do and knows what we think,
Oh.
even it keeps us out of
It
trouble all the
should
time.
guide us.
Yes,
It
it
should
should.
guide our actions,
Absolutely,
shouldn't it?
absolutely.
In tonight's study, God knew everything about Noah, yet God walked with him, called him righteous. So let's look at the scriptures and see what else we can find out.
There you
about
go.
old
There you
Noah.
go. We of course we all know the story of the flood, how it rained 40 days and nights, and when it never rained before, we don't believe, and water came up out of the ground even, and water covered everything for 150 days, and then it finally dried up, and it killed everything except Noah and his family. But as you said, we're looking today at Noah and the faith he had in what God asked him to do, and how obedient he was in going about and doing it.
And think of the time that it took him.
It took him 100 years to build the ark.
And the ridicule of all those
Can
around
you
him.
imagine the ridicule? What are you building? Why are you doing that? What's a flood? We don't know what a flood is.
yeah.
And
Incredible.
you're going to cover the entire world with water? Come on, you're crazy. Let's read what it says here. We're in Genesis 6 verses 5 through 9 to start with. It said, when the Lord saw that human wickedness was widespread on the earth, and that every inclination of human mind was nothing but evil all the time, the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and was deeply grieved. Then the Lord said, I will wipe mankind whom I have created off the face of the earth, together with the animals, the creatures that crawl, and the birds of the sky, for I regret that I made them. Then verse 8 comes along. Noah, however, found favor with the Lord. These are the family records of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, as you've talked about, blameless among his contemporaries. Noah walked with God. The world that Noah found himself in, Phil, was nothing but wickedness. We can't imagine, don't think how bad it was, except that in some cases we see that in the world today.
Yeah.
It says here that people were engaged in every kind of sinful behavior known to man. And what was God's reaction? He regretted creating a human race. And human race was the crowning point of God's creation. He left at the last. He wanted somebody made in his image to love him for who he was and what he could do for them. But then in Genesis 6 we see God said, I regret making human beings. But then in Genesis 6 chapter 8 we see the tender side of God's nature, and he desires to have a close relationship with humans, with mankind, even though we're stinky, sinful people. He wants to have a relationship with us. We see his tender side and the mercy God gave toward Noah and his family.
They said he was a righteous man.
Yeah.
So what's that mean to be a righteous man, Jay?
Well, and in this case, it talks about the fact that he found favor with the Lord. He followed. He walked with God. He did the things God wanted him to do. He acted the way God would like for everyone to act. He wasn't perfect. We know later on in Noah's life that he was not perfect, but he followed he did what the things God wanted him to do. And that's what righteous, I believe, in so many short words means. Moses wrote the book of Genesis. We know that. It was hundreds of years before this was probably written down. That mankind, the wickedness of mankind was not limited to their evil actions, but everything in their mind was corrupt as well as their actions. Even the way people think was impacted by sin. Humans were not merely doing wrong things. They were, when we work, and it's the same thing with us. If we work outside of the scope of Christ, if we're not within the walking with Christ as Noah was, then we won't not only commit sin, but we'll think sinfully.
And you know, we've both done that. We've worked with people, or we have went to school with people, and you sit back and scratch your head
Why?
and say, they just don't wanna do right.
Yeah, right.
You know, everything that they do is about themselves or doing for the,
Exactly right.
something wrong.
Thinking sinfully is kind of the way Jesus described it on the Sermon on the Mount when he said that thinking inappropriate and lustful thoughts about a woman was like committing adultery.
Yeah.
We don't have to actually do an act to commit a sin. We just have to think things in our mind, and that's a sin in what Christ said in the Sermon on the Mount. And it's kind of like I kind of wrote down here that it's kind of like the value of life. Do we value life today? And the answer is, you have as many abortions as we have going on. Of course, we've kind of curtailed that. Some of the laws have curtailed that, but not mankind hasn't curtailed it. But we don't value the life of babies. We don't value the life of adults. You turn on the TV every night, and there's another shoot. Well, there's not one shooting. There's
Was yesterday in Louisville. I think there was 3 different shootings.
and maybe one of them was a stabbing, but yes, 3.
That's right. One of them was a stab.
Yeah, and it happens every day. And
Every day.
you don't value life, and you have to be thinking about sin all the time to commit those type things. Jesus, or the writer says, Moses said that things were so bad that God said, the Lord said, he regretted that he had made mankind. Now, did God know mankind was going to be sinners? The answer is yes, God knew that. But since the people had hearts and minds that had been marred by sin, God had a heart full of grief. God did not want us, he did not make us to be sinners. He wanted us to be sinless people. He wanted us to do what, everything we do is good, but we know that Adam and Eve sinned, and therefore sin came into the world. God grieved our sin. And just like you and I feel. Now, I'm saying this about our children and our grandchildren, but our parents could say this about us. We've sometimes been grieved by the things that our children did,
Sure.
the things that our grandchildren did, and just like our parents were grieved by things that we did.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean we don't love them, just like God loves us. It means we're disappointed by what they did, but we still love them. They're still our children, and I think that's the way God feels about us. He still loves us when we sin, but he is disappointed by what we. I think disappointed probably might be a better word for us than by what they've done. But he still loves them, and it's the same way with us. And so I think the writer says that we can conclude that God's regret in this verse reflects his deep grief over the sin that man has committed.
Yeah.
Just as the Bible speaks about God being joyful over his creation, which it did in Genesis, we also see that God is grieved by the sin that mankind has committed. Because God wanted us to be perfect. He wanted to be able to come down to earth and walk with us like he did with Adam and Eve in the garden, and there not be any issues whatsoever. But we know that didn't last long. And the writer writes, I think the writer has a good statement here. He says, while God was not surprised by the evil behavior of mankind, nor unaware that their wicked behavior was coming, God knew people were going to see him. He was disappointed by it, displeased by it. And that's the same way we feel about our children and our parents felt about us. But he says, but God found favor with Noah. Noah was a righteous man and walked with God. And we've talked briefly about what righteous means. The writer kind of puts it like this: Noah walked with God and trusted him. His actions stood out among all the people in the world, Phil, because everybody else was running in the opposite direction from what Noah was doing and from God. They were running from God. But Noah was a man who lived in a right relationship with God. We hope that when we are dead and gone from this world, that people here will say they tried to live in a right relationship with God. And we hope that when we get to the pearly gates or whatever, however there are, that God says, come on in. I've had this relationship with you. I love you. You come on in and be with me. Now, in Hebrews 17:11, it talks describes a little bit more about Noah and his faith. It says, by faith, Noah, after he was warned about what was not yet seen, Noah was warned that there was a flood coming. They'd never seen a flood. And then he says, and he was motivated by godly fear. There's that word fear again that we talk about every once in a while. Noah was fearful of what God could do, which is, we need it in our hearts to some extent. And Noah built an ark to deliver his family. Noah was used by God to create a faith legacy for his family and for the world. God, through Noah, did the same thing he did through Adam and Eve and through Abraham. He started a new world, a new nation, a new country of people because of Noah being a righteous man. In the next verses, we're going to see that living by this faith that Noah did calls for us to be obedient.
And the point that you make is living by faith and walking with God is the first step in the right direction. And we choose that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we choose something else that's a little easier. But overall, if we do that, we're going to be closer to God and closer to what he wants us to be.
Yep.
And in these next verses, he says, and it's starting in verse 17, understand that I am bringing a flood waters on the earth to destroy every creature under heaven with breath of life in it. Everything on earth will perish. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark with your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives. You are also to bring the ark 2 of all the living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. 2 of everything, from the birds according to their kinds, from the livestock according to their kinds, and from the animals that crawl on the ground according to their kinds, will come to you so that you can keep them alive. Take with you every kind of food that is eaten, gather it as food for you and for them. And Noah did this. He did everything God commanded him. Oh, flood. We've had some floods.
Oh, we have lately, haven't we?
We feel like we know a little bit about what Noah's going to do.
There's still water standing in some places here around Sonora even today after a month or so.
Different scholars have talked about, was the flood just around over there in the Mideast? But JR, you had a farm out there at Flint Hill, and my farm over here in Oak Hill. We find fossils, seashells, reeds that grow on the bottom of the sea.
Yes.
We find those embedded in the rocks on that farm, in the ground.
Yep.
They didn't drop here
No.
out of the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean.
No.
At one time, this earth was flooded.
You find fish fossils on top of mountains.
On top of mountains.
How'd they get there?
Highest point in Kentucky, they've found fossils.
Yes, yeah.
So we know that was a worldwide event.
Yeah.
If we look at the evidence, it was on a global scale. It just wasn't restricted to one area. And then he's going to kill every creature on the earth. What we're going to eat.
Mm-hmm.
He gives instructions for that, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He says, I want you to take a male and female. And then he'll give some more instructions on the stuff that you eat.
Yeah.
But every creature around the world, and notice there, he didn't have to go round these things up.
No.
He said, you're to bring into the ark 2 of all the living creatures, male and female. Talking about all the animals that would crawl on the ground, said, but they will come to you.
Come to you, yeah.
So here comes a pair of snakes, here comes a pair of rats, and a pair of chipmunks. All these animals come up and board that ark with him. It's hard to imagine everything on the earth perishing, including the vegetation. That's a pretty good curse, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yet, he had had the faith from talking with God, from walking with God, that it was going to be the best thing for the earth, for God's planet, that all that evil would perish in a short time. Sometimes the rest of creation suffers because of the selfishness or the sinful nature of one person. We see it all the time, don't we? A child gets shot through a house, from a drug deal outside down the street.
Right.
They didn't even know what was going on. Paul wrote, creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it. The whole creation has been groaning together. Everything was under duress, like you said, like God had seen. We see this in another place in the scriptures, in Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah, right.
Now, not on this scale, but we know that he wiped it out.
Yep.
Wiped it off the face of the earth. From the time of Adam and Eve, supposed to watch over and care for creation, and then their sin brought down mankind, and it made it harder for mankind to be living out of the ground.
Yeah.
God, that was the punishment. Noah's kind of pictured like a new Adam. He's going to bring forth life on the new earth, he and his family. But, it did have a ramification for the rest of creation. So, eventually, God finds a covenant partner that won't mess up when he comes himself in the form of Jesus.
Right.
And comes to the earth. The ark, the instructions for the ark are back in the previous verses.
Right. I think between
You want to go back there and it'll talk about the gopher wood, the types of wood, how big to make it, cover it with pitch and all those types of things. That's way before the flood had begun.
yes, like I said, it took 100 years to think about to build it.
Do you think? And I mean, where Noah lived, there weren't a need for a lot of boats.
No.
And especially one that size, sitting on the side of a hill. But he had faith. He had faith to build it, and that pleased God. What is faith? That's the hope of things not seen, haven't come to fruition. But that you have that hope in God that, He will deliver what He promises. In this instance, condemn the world. And Noah became an instrument of righteousness to the new world. So he got two of everything, male and female. There weren't any transgenders on there. And there weren't any gays. So,
and they didn't take every kind of, I think what they probably did, they didn't take all the horses that it had involved, do a horse or the horses. That's when they evolved after that.
yeah, you had a couple of horses.
Yeah, yeah.
You had a couple of cows.
Yeah.
Well, the animals that you eat now, they put extra
A few more of them.
Put
Yeah.
extra on.
We'll see about that in these last verses.
And that shows God's kindness and His compassion for His people. He wanted them to have enough to eat.
Yeah, yeah.
He could have done that supernaturally, like He did so many things.
Well, it's like when the people left Egypt.
Sure.
He fed them for years there for
Sent
every morning.
manna, sent quail,
Yeah,
and He could have done it there, but He told Noah to prepare.
yeah.
Prepare. And I think part of this is training Noah too.
Yeah, I think so.
You
too.
know, every step you do with everything I tell you, take it every step, and you'll be okay. When do we get astray? It's when we don't do it.
Yeah, we don't follow
When
God.
we don't follow
Don't
God.
listen to him, read it, yeah, and follow his instructions.
Number 7 here is repeated 3 times in the first 4 verses of chapter 7. That's literally, it's a sign of completeness
Right.
and perfection in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Moses signaling to readers that God's plan is perfect. When you think Noah had that in his mind all along?
I think Noah had to believe in God and have faith in him, or he wouldn't have started out on this task.
Yeah, and it wasn't any surprise how he reacted to God's instructions for those who knew him, for his family. He's facing a monumental event, and he was going to obey God to the end of it. And he had a living faith, Jay, that God would provide. Like Wally says, he's encumbered himself. When he tells us to do something, he's encumbered himself to provide for us and help us get that thing done. And even though all this doom was forecast, it was not out of the realm of thought for Noah that he was going to survive it.
Yeah, he knew he was
That
going
he was going to be
You
okay.
think Noah, when the first drop of rain fell, he went, it didn't come true.
I imagine he was rushing around doing those last minute things.
I bet he was. Yeah, he was. Yeah.
And, you know, there's some that say, well, it hadn't rained up to that point. They had heavy dews,
Right.
and they really didn't have rain.
We think.
We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know that. But we think that some verses in over in the New Testament actually tell us that. We think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure Noah, when it started raining, he thought, man, yes, this is what I've been
And
working.
those next
what I've been working
verses,
for.
yeah, they teach what it is that if we live by faith, that honors God.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's take a look at things.
Now we'll jump over to chapter 8, and the flood's over. We know that, and the ark's actually on dry land. Noah sent the birds out, and they got to where they wasn't coming back, and he knew they were sitting on dry land, and God says, bring your family out, and bring all the animals out of the ark and multiply. And let's see what he says here. It said, when he got out, then Noah built an altar to the Lord. He took some of every kind of clean animal and every kind of clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. When the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, he said to himself, I will never again curse the ground because of human beings, even though the inclination of the human heart is evil from youth onwards. So there it tells you right there, God knows it's probably going to happen again, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to destroy everything. And I will never again strike down every living thing as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night will never cease. We see the first thing that we think the first thing that Noah is he's built an altar to the Lord. Now, Noah is the first person in the Bible that's ever mentioned as building an altar. Not Adam and Eve, not any of their children. It was Noah who built the first altar. And he built an altar to make a sacrifice to God. He was thankful to God that God not only told him to do what he wanted, he was willing to do it. God gave him the strength to do it. And because of Noah's obedience, God protected his family and all these animals that were in the boat. Just like Adam said, or God said he would do, God followed up on his plan. The altar was to make a sacrifice to God, who had just demonstrated both his unlimited power, and we see that in the flood, enough water on the earth to fill it, to even cover the mountains, but then also his loving compassion, his mercy that he had on Noah and his family.
Yeah. And you know, it was just as much a miracle that it reestablished life on the earth as it was to bring the flood.
Bring the flood, exactly, exactly. And Noah, the thing about it is, Noah was not told to build an altar. He did that spontaneous because of the love he had for God, and it was pleasing to God, because it tells us there in the first verse that, or second verse that we read, that the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma. It pleased God what Noah had done for him. Noah built an altar and offered burnt sacrifice to some of the clean animals. Now we've talked about that briefly. God said, and initially said, take 2 animals of every kind. Later on, he says, take 7 pairs of clean animals. Now, the clean animals hadn't been described at that point in time. But I think Noah knew what they were, because that came along later after the earth was filled again. Then that's when God and Moses Moses got the commandments from God about what clean animals were, and over in Deuteronomy and those books over that way. But anyway, Noah knew what they were. And he took, as you said, he took those extra animals, and part of them he used to sacrifice to God. Then it said that after the sacrifice was offered, that God made a promise to Noah, and not only to Noah, but to mankind, even to us here today. He said, never again will I curse the ground because of human beings. I think he was saying, I'm not going to curse the ground, because I know what they're going to do anyway, but I'm not going to curse them like to give the ground and blame the ground for what human beings have done. And never again will I strike down every living thing as I have done before, this time. And he went on later to not only make that promise, but showed Noah through the rainbow, this is a sign I'm going to show you that will never happen again. And the writer kind of wraps it up like this. Noah saw that God was faithful in doing precisely what he said he would do. God said, I'll protect you, build the ark, put the animals on, I will protect you and the animals. In light of all God did and who God is, Noah worshiped him through sacrifice. God does everything he tells us he's going to do for us too. Sometimes we worship him, sometimes we don't. We don't give him the credit that he deserves. But Noah, in this case, Noah gave God all the credit. Noah's worship was a clear sign of his obedience to God's command and his willingness to be used by God as God continued his plan with human beings and the earth we see here on earth.
And Jay, we know food was scarce.
Yes.
When he made that sacrifice, food was scarce.
Yes.
And yet he did it anyway.
He did it anyway.
And he wasn't called or asked to do it.
No.
Or required. It came from the heart.
Came from
Which
Noah's
is
heart.
where God wants us to worship.
He was thankful to God for what God had done for him, and why shouldn't we be? Why shouldn't we be thankful for what God has done for us?
You run off the road and you get back up on the road, you almost wreck. Thank Jesus.
Yeah, exactly right.
You think of different things that have occurred in your life where there was a significant time of worship. Our kids, when our kids are born.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
That's a worshipful event.
There's not an event any better than when your child or your children are born.
When those
Grandkids.
little ones get baptized.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
commit to the Lord, that's another time.
Yes.
How can we do that every day? How can we worship God every day? Practical ways.
Thank him for when we get up in the morning. Thank him for our health, for the things we got done that day.
Thank Him. Pray about those things around us.
Yeah.
That we see, we observe, and ask God's will be done. Ask Him where we can help things be better, or if He has something for us. Just make sure that we know what it is. And
thank him for Christian friends, for fellow Christians who help us along our path. We had the occasion today, Brother Tony and I did, to go see Bill Rout. I don't know how many times Bill said before I left, JR, thank you for being here, thank you for coming.
Yeah,
Thank
he
you."
always does.
He always does. And it makes you feel good, but it makes you feel bad that you're not there more often. But he appreciated us being there, and thank God for putting him in front of you that today, and you know, giving you the ability to go see him. And
Jay, our relationship with God's not meant to just stagnate.
no.
We need to grow it. And as we act in the way that Noah did, not on that scale, but
Right.
when we live righteously, when we attempt to do God's will and make those tough calls and do it, when we sacrifice without feeling a great urging from God,
Mm-hmm.
we do it out of not abundance, but out of
Mm-hmm.
perhaps, you know, a place like Noah was.
Yes.
You know, he didn't have much.
Right.
We look at the scripture about the widow, and they gave the mite,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the little bit. Sometimes it's not the size of the gift, it's the actual thought of giving and trying to help someone out that makes the difference. And then share the gospel. Man, take this study and share it with somebody. Imagine the faith that Noah had to have in order to pull that off. Everyone, from his family, the whole neighbor, you know, all the people around him. Probably some of those animals were saying, I'm not getting on that
I'm not
thing.
getting on that. That thing won't. We don't have any water flowing, but if we did have water, it wouldn't flow.
Well, yeah.
We normally, when we study the story of the flood, we don't study the faith of Noah that took Noah to do what God asked him to do. We kind of look over that, but Noah is one of the faithful men and one of the risk takers in the Bible. We're going to look at 5 or 6 more of them over the next few weeks. We're going to see that there are other guys that did the same thing.
Yeah, we'll bring you another good one next week.
Yeah, sure will.
Hope you enjoyed the study. We enjoyed bringing it to you.
Yes, we did. See you next
We'll
time.
see you next week.